My dorm was on the top floor of an old building, the kind that creaked and groaned with every step. My roommate Lily and I joked that the place was haunted, but it wasn't until halfway through the semester that things got weird. At night, I started hearing faint noises, scraping and shuffling sounds. At first, I thought it was coming from the hallway, but Lily pointed out something unsettling. The sounds were coming from above us. Probably squirrels or something, she said, but I wasn't so sure. The noises felt deliberate, like footsteps. One night I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up scrolling on my phone. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again, the scraping sound, followed by a faint whisper. I woke Lily, and we both sat in silence, straining to listen. Then we heard it clear as day, a voice. "Are you awake?" It was coming from the ceiling. Terrified, we grabbed a broom and banged on the ceiling. The noises stopped, and we convinced ourselves it was our imagination. A few days later, maintenance came to check the ceiling, but found nothing unusual. They assured us there was no crawl space or attic above our room, but the sounds didn't stop. One morning, I found something on my desk that hadn't been there before, a single crumpled wrapper from a granola bar I'd eaten the night before. Lily and I didn't eat in the room, and the wrapper had been in the trash. That night, we set up a camera to catch whatever was going on. The next morning, we reviewed the footage, expecting to see nothing. Instead, we saw it. Around midnight, the ceiling tile above my bed shifted, and a hand reached down, groping in the dark. Moments later, a face appeared, a man, pale and thin, staring into the room. The camera stopped recording shortly after, likely unplugged by him. We called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. They found evidence of a makeshift camp in a crawl space above our dorm, along with a collection of items he had stolen from students, including my missing granola bar. To this day, I can't sleep without looking up at the ceiling first. When I first moved into my dorm, I was nervous about having a random roommate. But when I met Sarah, I felt lucky. She was friendly, neat, and seemed like the perfect roommate. She had a strict routine, early mornings, late night studying, and always quiet and considerate. It was almost too perfect. The first weird thing happened about a month in. I came back early from a weekend trip, and Sarah wasn't in the room, but her desk was immaculate, her bed perfectly made, like no one had been living there. What threw me off was her closet. It was empty. No clothes, no shoes, nothing. When she returned later that night, I casually asked about it. She laughed it off, saying she'd taken her laundry home and was reorganizing. It seemed plausible, but the uneasiness lingered. One night, I woke up to the sound of shuffling. Sarah was sitting at her desk facing the wall whispering. Her phone wasn't on, and she didn't seem to notice me. I called her name softly. She froze for a moment before turning around, smiling. "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to wake you," she said, and climbed back into bed. I chalked it up to stress until a few days later, when I accidentally knocked over her bag. Inside were strange items. A photograph of me, locks of hair tied with string, and a small notebook filled with scribbles of my schedule. Classes, meals, even my trips to the library. My stomach churned. When I confronted her, Sarah didn't deny it. Her face broke into a wide grin, and she said, "I just like knowing you. You're fascinating." I reported her to the housing office, and they moved her out the next day. But the story doesn't end there. Months later, I found a note taped to the underside of my desk. It simply read, "You'll never find another roommate like me." It started during midterms. I was staying up late in my dorm, drowning in coffee and textbooks, when I noticed something odd. A folded piece of paper slipped under my door. At first, I thought it was just a prank. My dorm mates loved messing around, so I didn't take it seriously. But when I opened the note, my stomach flipped. It read, "You looked beautiful today in your green sweater." I froze. I had been wearing a green sweater earlier that day, but I hadn't left the building, and I definitely hadn't interacted with anyone. The next day, I shrugged it off as a joke, but then it happened again. Another note, this time more detailed. "You've been working too hard. Don't forget to take care of yourself." It felt personal, almost intimate, like someone had been watching me. I started locking my door and keeping my blinds closed, but the notes kept coming. One day I came back from class to find a note already on my desk. That's when I realized, whoever it was, they had been inside my room. I reported it to campus security, but they didn't find any signs of forced entry. They suggested I might have left my door unlocked, but I knew better. A week later, I decided to set a trap. I borrowed a small webcam from a friend and hid it on my bookshelf, pointing toward the door. The next morning, I found another note. This one was different. It simply said, "I know you're watching me now." When I checked the footage, the camera had been unplugged in the middle of the night. I moved out the following week, but sometimes I still wonder if they're watching me, wherever I am. I was assigned a roommate named Emily. She was quiet and kept to herself, which I appreciated. But there was one rule she made very clear. Don't touch my desk drawer. It seemed odd, but I didn't want to start any drama. Emily was quirky in other ways too. She always wore the same hoodie, even when it was hot, and she had a habit of humming to herself late at night. One evening, I came back early from class and noticed the drawer slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of me. I peeked inside. It was filled with old photographs of people I didn't recognize. Men, women, children, all staring blankly at the camera. Some photos were torn, others burned at the edges. At the very back was a small journal. Before I could read it, the door slammed. Emily was standing there, her eyes wide with rage. "What are you doing?" she hissed, slamming the drawer shut. I stammered an apology, but she didn't say another word. That night, I slept with my door locked. A few days later, Emily seemed normal again, almost overly friendly. She invited me to watch a movie with her, but I declined, saying I had a headache. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. I opened my eyes to see Emily standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. "I told you not to touch my things," she said softly. I reported her to campus security the next morning, and they moved her out. A week later, I got curious and Googled her name. What I found chilled me to the bone. An article about a girl named Emily who had been arrested for stalking and harassing her past roommates. The picture was unmistakably her. When I moved into my dorm, I was assigned a single room. Or so I thought. The first night was uneventful, but the second night I woke up to the sound of movement. I opened my eyes to see a girl standing by the second bed, the bed I was told no one would be using. She was petite, with long black hair, wearing an oversized sweater. "Hi," she said shyly. "I'm Lena. They must not have told you I'd be moving in." It was late, and I was too tired to argue. I figured housing had messed up the paperwork. Lena was quiet and reserved, but something about her felt off. She didn't have much stuff, just a single duffel bag she kept under her bed. She also never left the room, not for class, meals, or anything. One night I asked her about it. She just smiled and said, "I like it here. It's safe." I started noticing other odd things. My snacks would disappear, my textbooks were moved, and my phone charger went missing. I thought it was Lena, but when I confronted her, she denied everything, her face blank. Then one night, I woke up to find Lena sitting on the floor, staring at the wall. She was humming softly, rocking back and forth. The next morning, I went to the housing office to ask about her. The RA looked confused and pulled up the records. "There's no one named Lena assigned to your room," she said. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. When I returned to my dorm, the second bed was empty, the duffel bag gone. I asked around, but no one had seen her leave. The only trace she left behind was a note taped to my mirror. "I'll miss sharing this space with you." It was my sophomore year, and midterms were approaching. The campus library became my second home. I'd spend hours there, tucked away in a quiet corner on the top floor. One night, I stayed later than usual. The library was almost empty, except for a few other students scattered across the floor. As I packed up my things, I noticed a shadow move out of the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was just someone walking past, but when I looked around, no one was there. The floor was silent except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. I shook it off and headed to the elevator. As the doors opened, I caught a glimpse of something in the reflection, a dark figure standing just behind me. I whipped around, but the hallway was empty. My heart raced as I stepped into the elevator. The ride down felt unbearably slow, and every time the doors opened on another floor, I expected someone or something to step in, but no one did. When I finally reached the ground floor, I bolted out of the library, convinced my imagination had gotten the best of me. The next night, I told my friend Julia about it. She laughed it off, teasing me for being jumpy. But then her face grew serious. You know, she said, there's a story about the library. They say a student disappeared here years ago. Some people claim they've seen him late at night. I laughed nervously, but her words stuck with me. A week later, I was back at the library, determined to finish my project. Around midnight, the lights on my floor flickered, then went out completely. I grabbed my phone for light and made my way to the stairs. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, so soft I almost missed it. Why did you leave me? I froze, my phone shaking in my hand. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. I ran down the stairs, not stopping until I reached the exit. The next day, I learned something unsettling. Security had found a notebook left on the top floor, a notebook I hadn't seen before, but it was full of my handwriting. At the start of the semester, I was assigned a random roommate, Ashley. She was quiet and kept to herself, but we got along well enough. A few weeks in, she decided to move out for personal reasons. I didn't mind. Having the space to myself felt like a luxury. One night, about a week after Ashley left, I got an email from housing. Roommate request pending approval. I hadn't requested a new roommate, so I called the housing office. They said someone named Evan had submitted a request to move into my room. The name didn't ring a bell, but I figured it was just a mix-up. The next day, I started noticing strange things. My desk chair would be slightly moved, my closet door left ajar, even though I always kept it closed. I convinced myself it was nothing, until I woke up one night to the sound of the door handle jiggling. I froze, my heart pounding, and stared at the door. It stopped after a few seconds, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been trying to get in. The following morning, I reported it to housing, but they assured me the building was secure. That night, I placed a small dresser in front of the door before going to bed. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a loud thud. The dresser had been pushed aside, and the door was slightly open. Standing in the doorway was a man. He smiled, holding a copy of the housing request in his hand. "I'm Evan," he said, stepping into the room. I screamed and grabbed my phone, but by the time campus security arrived, he was gone. Housing later admitted that Evan had submitted the request using falsified documents. They never figured out how he got into the dorm,